Hello, Bonsai friends. This is Evan Pardue of Underhill Bonsai, and welcome to episode 31 of Little Things for Bonsai People, the podcast. And this time, I'm joined by my co-host, Carmen Leskoviansky. How you doing today, Carmen?
I'm good. I got a haircut.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, the listeners can't really see it, but but awesome. I guess it's in preparation for next week, right?
It is indeed.
Next week, me and Carmen will be at the American Bonsai Society Learning Seminar. That will be in Denver, Colorado. It's going to actually start on the 8th. I know that's set up and there's a couple of things happening on the 8th of June. Yeah, it's June. And then it runs through 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th. And does that cover all the days? It goes to the Sunday. It goes from Thursday to Sunday. So lots of workshops, lots of lectures, demonstrations, really awesome stuff happening. I know Kathy Shaner is going to be there. I know Jennifer Price is going to be there. What's his name? Trained with Ryan. Oh man.
Todd Schaeffler.
Yep. Todd Schaeffler is going to be there. And I'm sure we can kind of look into that a little bit later. But if you guys want to check it out, just go over to the Rocky Mountain Bonsai Society. They have their ABS drop-down menus. So be some cool stuff going on. But today we're going to be discussing we're going to dapple in a couple different topics. Me and Carmen are going to pick up where me and Mike left off on the previous episode about display, what to do when prepping a bonsai for a formal show, and how to differentiate the club show. You're more of you're kind of just going in and presenting the tree and experimenting with different things, from going from a bonsai club type relaxed show to a more formal, more what's expected in a more of a, I don't want to say competition, but a little bit more dressed up. Yeah. And then if we get to it today, we might talk a little bit about pop bonsai. I know this is something that Carmen's been itching to talk about for a little while. So maybe we can get to that if we don't run out of time today. But before we get started with that, I do need to mention that our podcast is sponsored by our amazing patrons that we also call our best buds, our bonsai best buds. We currently have the list as standing. It's Tori Solis, Warehouse Rat, Boyd Snellgrove, Ricky Ruins, Joshua Bentley, Snappy Chappers, Ryan Giordano, Joel Jenkins, Justin Knight, Backyard Bonsai Australia, The Ladies at the Flower Market, Taylor Peacock, Chase Putuit, and Vicky Oth. Thank you guys so much for being Bonsai Best Buds and supporting the show. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this, and we wouldn't have all the support and all the questions and comments and awesome critiques. To mention, we just launched the Discord server literally right before I started this recording with Carmen today. At time of recording, this would have been yesterday because it's going to come out tomorrow. And basically, you guys, if y'all haven't dropped in there yet, if you're listening to this now, Bonsai Best Buds and also our $1 tier patrons at Bonsai Buds can go in there and you guys can hang out. Me and Carmen and Mike pop in periodically and hang out and chat with you guys. Make sure y'all submit critiques, like pictures of trees that y'all need help with. Don't be shy. We're not gonna, if you don't want your tree to be loud capped on social media or something for the critiques we've done in the past, we don't have to do that. We can just go in and talk about the tree. But if you want a tree to be discussed on the podcast, I will post it to the Little Things for Bonsai People Instagram, and people can refer to it then, and we'll actually go through in detail like we've done in the past. And then also, we talked about progression shots. So if you guys want to show us a tree, and then we can help you guys think about how to progress the tree, what moves to make, what branches to bend, what branches to cut, what pot would look great for your tree, et cetera, as time moves on. I think that'd be a really awesome interactive way for us to kind of, see what the listeners are into, see what you guys need and want, and we can kind of hang out and, become a little community here of bonsai people over this podcast. I think that'd be really interesting.
Maybe you can even see my new haircut.
Yeah, even maybe Carmen will just drop her new haircut into the Discord.
If you can't make it to Denver, I'll show you on Discord.
Everybody come to Denver so you can see Carmen's awesome new haircut.
Oh yeah.
Not just the Bonsai show.
Right.
But yeah, but yeah, the Denver show. Speaking of that, that's kind of where the display conversation came up on our previous episode. Mark, me and Mike were talking about sea hibiscus, and then we kind of evolved the conversation into display conversation because I feel like it's something that needs to be
Mhm.
kind of teased through. So for you guys that listened to the previous episode, and also for Carmen because she wasn't on that episode, to give you all a recap, we talked about selecting a tree, which trees, like kind of how we talked about episodes ago, Carmen, about like why is it important to
Mhm.
have show trees in your collection.
Yeah.
So we already had like that prerequisite pretty much down pat. It's like, okay, we have our trees, which ones we're going to use, and then we submit X, Y, Z tree to whatever show we feel like is a good show that we would like to show the premise of the show. For instance, if we wanted to do the national show, we have to consider what type of trees get submitted to the national show in Rochester, what type of trees would be submitted to the Pacific Bonsai Expo over in
Hmm.
California, Jonas's show.
Hmm.
So you have to kind of consider the basis, what's normally expected of those shows, and then we were talking about the steps on how to get that tree ready.
Hmm.
So, like, not making any, and Mike made a really great point. He's like, don't make any drastic design, altering like cuts or any kind of
Hmm.
cutbacks that'll set the tree back really far. And we
Yeah.
also, just so you know, we also talked about the 2 year plan.
Hmm.
And I brought up my perspective on the 2 year plan. To kind of light recap on that, it was take the tree that you're gonna submit, give that tree a full year, like repot that tree into the display pot that you're going to put it into, like its ideal pot. And it needs to be done
Hmm.
with a lot of the training stuff, right? It needs to
Yeah.
be refined. It needs to be starting to look really good because you're going to spend these next 2 years getting to look really, really good. And the attention to detail is going to be a lot more drastic. It's a lot more intricate, a lot more attention to detail than you have
Mm.
ever experienced with a tree before if you've never displayed bonsai. So, from what I've said so far, Carmen, what's your kind of approach from what you've heard? It sounds like you're ready to put a few comments in there.
Oh, I always have comments. Yeah. No, I think you make a really good point about don't make any drastic cuts or don't do anything drastic design wise, especially after you've already submitted your tree because that's the tree that they accepted and that's what they're expecting. Um, if you send a picture of your tree in March and the show's in September and you cut off a giant branch, there's really nothing you can do, and you could really, change the whole design of your tree and not really have it be show ready anymore. So I like the idea of the 2 year plan. If you're planning on attending a show in a couple of years and you have the time um, to really prep, even maybe more than one tree, so you have a couple of options for the shows. That's a really great way to do it because you're planning ahead. You can repot it. You can do whatever changes you need to do the year before so that the year of, you're really just kind of maintaining that style. One of the benefits of having a lot of trees is that sometimes you don't have to necessarily plan 2 years ahead. You can just take what's looking good that year. But I think that's maybe more of the exception than the rule. I think generally you do want to plan ahead for a year or two of what you're going to show and when. And yeah, definitely consider what the parameters of the show are because with nationals, I know that Bill is oftentimes looking for some diversity of species and styles. And I know for the Pacific Expo, they were going through a lot of different trees and some really interesting stuff got in there. So I know they're always looking for something a little bit different. Really good, of course, really good examples of um, what you might call traditional Japanese bonsai, but also maybe a little bit of a twist on some things that we've kind of taken an artistic liberty on. So yeah, I think consider what the shows are looking for and plan ahead, and you'll be in good shape.
Yeah, the can I kind of go back on the Pacific Bonsai Expo? one of the things that I remember Jonas was asking for in particular, he said he was making room for
Hmm.
unconventional displays. Like
Hmm.
he was highly encouraging that. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, and
that's
I know a lot of those trees that were there are now up at the Pacific Bonsai Museum. They're doing a show called Avant Garden, which is all unconventional trees. It's really, really cool. If you can't make it there, at least check out their Facebook and Instagram. They post a lot of pictures of all the really cool stuff they have there.
yeah, there's been some pretty good coverage on that
Hmm.
display. And leave it up to the Pacific Bonsai Museum to really put on just some of
Hmm.
the most intricate and awesome displays.
Yeah,
Um,
their exhibitions are super good.
and
Gold star for Aaron Packard.
yeah, I was about to say Aaron Packard. He's doing an amazing
We'll have to
job.
get him on the podcast sometime.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'll have to reach out and see if he'll be available. He'd be a great
Hmm.
guest just to
Yeah.
see where his mind is going because he's a young
Hmm.
guy and he's got a lot of stuff that
Hmm.
it feels like he's just getting started. So yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, those types of shows are unique and it depends on what crowd you're looking at. Like I think Nationals is kind of a good example versus the Pacific Expo is
Hmm.
that you're looking at very traditional yet species diverse, which is a great point because
Hmm.
Nationals Bill Valvanis really wants to cover like as far as every bonsai culture goes across the United States. He's trying to make sure
Hmm.
that no one's excluded, but at the same time, he wants to make sure it's within the parameters of what's expected from
Right.
bonsai.
Hmm.
So it's not as narrow as it sounds, but it sounds kind of narrow. But once you
Hmm.
kind of understand your range in species and what they're capable of and what's expected of those, unfortunately, I don't see a lot of like for me, for instance, I could
Hmm.
submit a very formal or informal upright style bald cypress that could be
Hmm.
outstanding. And I'm sure something like that I've seen other bald cypresses like that. But when it comes
Hmm.
to flat tops,
Right.
flat tops might have a hard time getting in. They'd
Hmm.
have to be the exception to the rule, kind of
Right.
showing literati esque design. Where I think over in the
Hmm.
Pacific Bonsai Expo, it's possible,
Hmm.
but that show would be seemingly impossible for me to get to.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, I'm pushing it with the show in Denver. It's a 20-hour drive just to get
Woo.
there. Yeah. So
Worth
uh,
it.
what was that?
Worth it.
Oh, I thought the audio broke out for a second. I was like, what?
What? What'd she
Yeah,
say?
it sounded like something else. It was like worth up, and I was like, oh, okay. But anyway, yeah, it is going to be worth it. I haven't been to Denver, so we'll see how that goes.
That's a long drive.
And another thing that was interesting about the Denver show, and ABS is kind of like someone asked me the other day about what is the show like and what does it pertain like what do you
Hmm.
expect for each
Hmm.
version of it. I'm like it's when the Super Bowl comes to your state.
Yeah.
like like it brings a lot of great things to your bonsai club. It's more of a bonsai club supported show.
Right. Yeah. So wherever they move it around the country every year, and so whatever place they're in, that club kind of takes over the planning and the preparation and helping plan the event. So this year it's in Denver, so Rocky Mountain Bonsai Society is helping out. I know in the past it's been in like St. Louis, so that club helped out. It's been in Michigan before, so that club helped out. So it's like it's really cool because then you get to see all of these regional trees that and people get to display, who may not be able to make it to Denver this year, but if it's in, I don't know, Virginia or something next year, then those people will be able to help put on the show their trees. So it's a really great way, I think, of kind of outreach for that club and getting everybody involved.
Yeah, and it brings other things that are special, like vendors
Oh
that
yeah.
wouldn't have normally shown up to that club.
Mm-hmm.
Which I can't express this enough, I guess is this the best way to say it, is that if you're serious about getting into bonsai display, and I learned this from a good friend of mine that that's also done a lot of bonsai shows and stuff like this, is that when you show up to the vendors and you're looking around and there's stuff that you're like, man, I wish I could find like good display tables or the oak and other the little burrows that they cut really
Mm-hmm.
flat
The
for.
little Jitas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
For jitas for accent
Mm-hmm.
kosamonos. And then you're like, some potters, some good pottery would be awesome. Potters that you don't even know about, haven't even discovered
Mm-hmm.
yet. Go to those vendor areas, and even if you can't bring material home, you might get lucky. And sometimes, like for the national show, I found a really amazing European olive that actually will grow
Ooh.
where I'm at, and I picked it
Mm-hmm.
up for a great price. And
Yeah.
I may not necessarily show it in a big show, but it's still a great piece. It's something that I would never be able to get. So I
Yeah, this is the best place I think to the shows are the best place to yeah, purchase this stuff because there's usually a really good variety. It's stuff you haven't necessarily seen before, especially like you mentioned, like I don't know which local folks are going to be in Denver, but I'm sure it's people that I haven't heard of before, plus probably some other people that, are kind of regulars vending. Um, which is always good. But yeah, you can get some great deals and find some really unique stuff. My favorite was a couple national shows ago. There was, a tool, a vendor that was selling tools, and they had kind of like the rust bucket tools that were like, here's $5 tool because it's kind of used and maybe it's chipped or whatever. But it was a great way for those people who were just wanting to kind of start getting into bonsai but didn't want to buy a $50 tool. They could buy a used scissor, and it maybe wasn't the best, but it was at least a reasonable quality. So that was kind of fun. But yeah, you can find stands, you can find Jita, you can find pots. I picked up a Nick Lens pot once. Like you just never know what you're gonna find. So and
eh,
chat with the vendors too, because a lot of times if they don't have it with them, they may have it back home, or they may know somebody who does have it. Or if you're looking for a pot for a specific tree, sometimes those potters will be willing to do a commissioned order. So it's a great place to kind of network too.
yeah, going to a bonsai show, you are there for a particular reason, and all those people there that are in the vendor area are there. They are there for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're into displaying bonsai and you want to get serious, I guarantee you'll find resources. Just like
Yep.
Carmen said, there's going to be somebody for everything you can think of in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the best things about it is it becomes a community and a network once you
Mm-hmm.
start to kind of immerse yourself in that world of display.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I know for some of our other listeners that are still like in the beginning of their bonsai journey, a lot of this stuff sounds a little imposing, a little, like, oh, I'm not there yet. But this is a big part of why we do bonsai, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not a bad idea to have goals or expectations or hey, I've got clientele that I work with down here in Louisiana, and I've got a few of them say I'm not interested in ever displaying a bonsai, you know, but doesn't mean that you wouldn't be able to learn to appreciate a show, and then that same person might turn around and see themselves displaying one just because they felt like it. They were like, oh,
Yeah.
isn't that bad?
Maybe you'll
Uh,
get inspired.
yeah, and that's another thing is going to shows gives you even better perspective. We even talked about
Mm-hmm.
that in a previous episode, going to club shows and doing those small shows to build confidence.
Yep.
This is a little bit different, but uh, just being able to meet other bonsai professionals that are doing just absolutely amazing work and talk to them about their techniques, then you can further break those things down for yourself as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I can't recommend going to a show anymore, but yeah, that's why we're having these conversations. Just kind of break these
Mm-hmm.
things down. And we got a little off track about prepping said tree. But yeah, but I remember another thing that me and Mike got into with that was going in and choosing an appropriate accent plant and then considering your display and the theme of your display and what you're going to be showing, what picture are you painting for the viewer. And
Yeah,
me,
that was going to be one of my questions was, did you guys discuss at all kind of what the purpose of display is and what the goals are?
Yeah, we got into that a
Okay.
good bit. And so
Cool,
we
cool.
Mike was saying that he really likes abstraction type
Mm-hmm.
displays where you're not necessarily showing an accent that is completely adjacent to
Mm-hmm.
the species of tree that's being displayed.
Right.
Whereas I am a little bit more on the side of a naturalist.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I'm showing my water elm, and alongside it, I'm showing carnivorous plants that
Ooh,
actually exist in my range.
that's
So
so
a
cool.
water elm would exist alongside the ground
Mm-hmm.
pitchers, like the pitcher plants. You're familiar with them.
Oh yeah.
For our listeners, that's Sarracenia, which is a pitcher that grows from the ground here in Louisiana, and they exist all the way up to into the Carolinas, and also sundews, which also exist in North America, and
Mm-hmm.
also Venus flytraps. A lot of people
Okay.
don't know this, but Venus flytraps exist in North Carolina and down.
Mm-hmm.
They're an awesome plant, and so I wanted to show the water elm with something that is believable within its
Mm-hmm.
range that you could see.
Right.
And then the stand, I was going to use a stand, but it ended up being that it's an outdoor display and there's no stands like wood made stands that would
Oh.
be fancy.
Mm-hmm.
That was a new thing to me. But
Yeah, I didn't realize it was an outdoor display.
in the case of the water elm, I was going to make sure to use somebody who crafted the stand out of locally sourced materials from here that is an American bonsai stand creator.
Mm-hmm.
And then the scroll was the only thing that was going to be a little off
Mm-hmm.
because the scroll was also the holder. I can't remember the name of it. I'm sure there's a lot of other enthusiasts out there that are familiar with the name of the piece that holds this actual scroll in place.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to look it up. If somebody knows even in the listener Discord, if you drop it in there, I can bring it
Yeah,
up.
let us know. Somebody right now is screaming at their
Yeah,
phone, like, "Oh my God, it's this!"
some people and the lady who I bought it from, she actually made it herself.
Ooh,
And so and I can't remember her name at the moment, but I believe she is going to be in Denver. She was at the Texas show, but
cool.
she knows everything about Japanese scrolls and display and proper tokonome arrangements and all that good stuff. Like
That's amazing.
she knows everything from top to bottom. So she makes her own scroll holders, and mine has a magnolia
That's pretty.
cut out. So it's the magnolia because that's the state flower of Louisiana, and it's a southern
Ah.
magnolia. And then the only thing that I couldn't get straight on was the scroll itself. I wanted it to be a handmade,
Mm-hmm.
hand painted watercolor scroll. It has deer on it, and they're kind of moving towards like a kind of a dusk kind of setting.
Yeah, that's
And,
nice.
and it's all appropriate. So that's kind of the thing that I was imagining for it. Whereas Mike was saying he likes to see texture, color, and an accent plant that is
Mhm.
complementing the tree in a very specific way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's interesting because I feel like there's a lot of ways to go about doing display. And one of the things that I've heard about some of the Japanese displays and having seen some of them is that there's a subtlety to it where you don't necessarily get kind of every piece of the story of like you can tell what time of year it is, you can kind of tell where the tree is from, but they don't always give away every bit of kind of they kind of let the viewer kind of fill in blanks within their story to so that it has some kind of impact on you, you know. um and I tend to be more of a naturalist, I think, like you, where I try to complement the tree with something that maybe isn't exactly the native that would be growing in the same woods as it, but if I can get close to, you know, that kind of native plant, if I don't have the right species of fern, but I have a fern, um,
yeah, and for
I
scale.
would probably do something like that. Yeah, and to scale. I like Mike's idea of more focusing on color and texture. That's a little bit more abstract, which is cool. I think my only critique there would be if you have a deciduous tree and you're showing it with some kind of tropical orchid, that would really be distracting to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I guess kind of those things I would think about in those cases of, even if you're focusing more on color and texture and scale and that kind of thing, still maybe consider that it might be distracting if you have something from a totally different region, um, you know, with your tree.
And one of the things that Mike is making consideration with that is a little bit outside of even my scope is that he works with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of tropicals that are imported from all over the
Mm-hmm.
place.
Yeah.
So that's
I
kind
feel
of one
like
of
you
the
get a lot more
things
freedom with tropicals.
you do. They're very
Mhm.
flexible because tropicals do some weird stuff. Like they can
Mhm.
be smooth, smooth barked and have crazy amount of thorns and then have like
Mhm.
beautiful, delicate foliage with poofy flowers and you can have all kinds of stuff going on with tropicals
Mhm.
and or you could have a really, really rough bark tropical and it's got, delicate flowers on it, or it's got some other weird feature to it that is hard to describe. Like kind of like the cross between seeing a Primna mycophilia
Mhm.
versus like I guess the sea hibiscus is another just example of just a weird kind of thing. How do you pair a sea hibiscus with something? I don't even know
Yeah.
where that tree's from. How do you pair a Primna mycophilia, which is the really, really small leafed Primna?
Mhm.
What do you pair with that? A buttonwood.
Yeah.
I think a buttonwood would be a little easier to pin down.
Yeah,
And I
we know
would,
where it's kind of native too, and
yeah, it's a
yeah.
beach loving tree. I mean,
Mhm.
we could, well, not necessarily loving. It's kind of like saying bald cypresses love the swamp. They don't necessarily
Mhm.
love the swamp. That's just where they can survive without
Right.
competition. Um, so you choose for your buttonwood. I've seen some crazy buttonwood displays. Buttonwoods
Mhm.
literally mounted onto twisted pieces of dead driftwood that were found at the
That's
beach
fun. Yeah.
with sand sprinkled on the display. And I'm just like, okay, you know,
Maybe a little too literal there.
there's some very literal takes. And that's
Yeah.
and that's my other thing is like how literal can a display become?
Right.
But then at the same time, we talk about avant garden and you have
Mhm.
Michael Hagedorn over here making plant stands look like they're literally jumping off the table.
Right. Yeah. You got a
So
larch in a vacuum. You got all kinds of fun stuff.
yeah.
That's a whole that'll be our pop bonsai conversation, I think, because that's a
And
whole different kind of
and you
thing.
feel like that stuff kind of falls a little bit more in line with pop bonsai in your opinion?
I don't think I would consider it pop bonsai, but I think that it would be kind of in the realm of more non-traditional.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get too far down there, I want to say too that if the other option, if you don't have an accent plant, is that you could use a little figurine or a suiseki, so a stone, to accent your plant as well. So it doesn't have to be an accent plant. I feel like those accent plants tend to be a little bit easier to get your hands on and create yourself. These other things can be expensive, um, and you have to kind of search them out. But if you don't have a plant, those things can be really interesting. And I've seen some really kind of unique ones too, because maybe it doesn't have to be, a figurine that was purchased in Japan or a suiseki that was imported. Maybe it's a river rock you found, or um, a little figurine, a little bit of art that um, your friend made, something like that to complement instead of a plant. So it can be something besides a plant, but still it has to kind of make sense with your storytelling and your display.
Um, which tree was it at the previous nationals 2000, was it 2019?
Mm,
There was a tree, it was displayed with an axe,
ooh,
like the tip of the axe.
I don't
Because
remember that one. I wasn't at the last nationals, unfortunately. Um,
I think it was Todd
oh,
Schlafer.
it might have been. Yeah,
I think it was
that would
either
be
that
cool.
or Randy Knight. I don't want,
Hmm.
I'm sure some people know better than me, even though I was at that show, which is, kind of silly, but there's so much stuff going on.
Yeah,
Um,
it's hard to remember every who
yeah,
who did
but
what.
one of those two trees, I'm pretty sure it was Todd's, had a actual chop mark in the shari of the tree.
Ooh,
And
that's cool.
the claim is that that tree might have been lumbered or chopped on for firewood, maybe by somebody in the mountains at that point
Mhm.
in time, maybe 50 years, a century ago, no telling how old it really could be. And to further like show off that mark,
Mhm.
a rusty old axe, not with the handle, but just the
Just the
metal
blade.
part, just the blade
That's
was
really
there.
cool. That's a really cool idea.
And that was shown at nationals, which is supposed to be the much more formal show. So
Hmm.
there is a lot of flexibility in these displays than more than you would think, but it was presented in a way where it was a little bit more elegant. It wasn't
Hmm.
bluntly displayed. It wasn't like he went down to the hardware store and bought a pristine
Shiny
axe,
new Max.
yeah, from like Home Depot, and it had like the
Hmm.
tag on it still. It has more, it's more what's the word for it? Thought,
Refined.
well, it's a thoughtful, a more visceral
Yeah. Hmm.
kind of
Like maybe you
approach.
had found that axe head over by the tree in the mountains.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Like unintentional, and that was kind of the story. So your bonsai display could also tell stories,
Hmm.
but don't make the story weird or crazy, I guess. Kind of like,
Hmm.
instead, he literally, if he would have literally went at the tree with like a chainsaw and then put like a smelly gasoline smelling like gas like chainsaw sitting on the tabletop with it, and wood
Right.
chips all over the floor, and you know
Hmm.
in in some perspectives, like if we're talking like that, um I've seen a few people try to display trees with that type of uh there's another word escaping me. I barely got that last word, that last smart word that I used. Don't worry, Matt will go
It'll
in and
come to you.
Matt will edit a cool word in there and I'll sound great. No,
There you go.
but I guess the same type of finesse in a
Yeah.
display.
Hmm.
If you can make the elements work, something interesting, different, and it's got to be to scale. It can't take up your whole display.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know. That's kind of part of it. We're kind of talking more elaborately about concepts and less about the prep of the tree at this point. But these things are important
Yeah.
because they don't know what you're bringing. They know what you're bringing as far as the tree,
Hmm.
but usually they most shows like that leave it up to your discretion, you know. And if
Yeah.
you
You don't
show,
have to submit your whole display, just the tree.
I mean, and if you show up with something radical and they say no, doesn't mean you can't say, well, this is what I have planned. If it doesn't
Yeah.
work for your show, we can make adjustments. So that's
Hmm.
another thing too, is this is a big ask for some people. I know, especially getting into it, is bring extra stands.
Hmm.
This was something that was recommended to me by another bonsai enthusiast that shows a lot. Bring extra stands, bring extra accent plants in
Yep.
case one fizzles out on your travels, or
Hmm.
dies, unfortunately. Um, and then just have everything on hand that you would need. This kind of draws us back into prep for the show.
Yeah.
Bring your tool bag.
Oh God, yeah. Bring your tool bag. Yep.
Bring everything.
Bring everything.
Anything
Yeah.
that you work on your tree with, bring it, because I
You
guarantee
might
you
need it.
something's going to happen.
If you don't bring it, you'll need it. If you bring it, you probably won't.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, definitely. And that's something too, is to, I mean, I'm thinking back to the last time I took a tree to a show, and yeah, I mean, I had a couple options for, Jita for the Kusamono. I did only have one table, or one stand, but yeah, having extras, and even just in your own collection at home, the more stuff you have, the more options you have to create different displays. And this is not necessarily about show prep at this point, but a great thing to do to practice display is with your local club or some friends, who do bonsai with you.
Mhm.
Bring all your display stuff together and put together different things. You can always borrow stuff from friends, from your club, if you don't have exactly what you need. That's a great way to kind of get more bang for your buck and just kind of share your resources. Just be sure to label all your stuff, because sometimes
Yeah,
I'll make
getting
it
mixed
back to you
up.
otherwise. Uh,
Yeah.
but
Oh, I'm sure people will be able to label the trees and get them back to the proper owner, but
oh, trees, yeah, but
there's a
Ajita
lot
can
of
disappear pretty easily.
yeah, and some of these things are delicate and they're hard to find and they can be
Hmm.
pricey. I mean, the
Yeah.
smallest, like these little copper. You ever seen those little copper crabs?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Those are. I mean,
They
I'm
can be
not.
ridiculous.
I'm not going to
Yeah,
sit
I
here
bought one
and
in
name
Japan. It wasn't a crab;
prices.
it was a snail, and it was like $60 there. And I know that here, if I had gotten it here, it would have been at least twice that. So,
Yeah,
whew,
and those things are valuable, but they really can make your display unique or make it shine, or if
mhm.
it's something. I mean, and there's trends and there's different things that are made for bonsai, things that we don't even get to see in other countries. And
Yeah.
yeah, just yeah, like that's the right thing. That's the very right thing to do is to make sure you label, keep a track of things. I was going to bring it up whenever you were mentioning going to clubs and playing around with different things and maybe borrowing pieces from people. Um, there's a group down in Florida that they get together and they submit trees in mass. When I went to
Mhm.
the national show, 18 wheeler literally like rolled up with all these
Oh
tropicals
gosh.
on it,
Wow.
and
That's
they
cool.
it's a bonsai group,
Yeah.
and they put together uh show-hin displays because that's another thing that's kind of
Mm.
challenging with for individual bonsai people unless you're
Yep.
really going hard in the paint for like show-hin like Mike does where you've
Yeah.
got the little stands and the little jitas and the actual whole entire rack for all your trees to be on and you got good variety. It's
Hmm.
tough to pull together that display,
Yeah.
so maybe you
Yeah.
can lean
Because
on a group, you know.
that's a great idea. Because if you want to show your shohin, sometimes how many trees are on a stand? Five plus six on another one on the side. So you need like 6 or 7 trees for those displays. And if you're counting, if you only have 6 trees, they all have to be ready. And it's hard to get 6 trees at the
At the
at the
same
same
time
show
looking
level at the
all
same
good.
time. So you need
Yeah.
like triple that. You need 18 shohin if you're going to show one display. So
Mm-hmm.
I think, and shohin is all about the accessories. You're totally right. You need your stand, but then you need all your little stands and your jita and your accents and your it's all about the stuff, which is super fun. But I think doing that as a group is a great idea. And yeah, I think that's kind of genius. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
kind of coming together and creating the best of the best for a show like that.
I think that we could totally do a whole separate thing on Shohin, especially
Oh
with
yeah.
if we can get Mike, me and you and Mike on because we kind of have a oh not kind of with Mike driving the Shohin
Mm-hmm.
conversation. I'm sure we could get some really cool stuff because there
Totally.
are nuances within Shohin and the Shohin display that go
Mm-hmm.
even beyond just
Oh
regular
yeah.
bonsai display.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to dive
Species
too
type,
far on that.
directional. Oh boy, yeah, it's fun. Pot
species
colors.
species selections and all that good stuff and
Mm-hmm.
just like we were talking about earlier where you need to choose your stand, your accent, and your scroll if you're doing a 3 point, and it needs to show the
Mm-hmm.
time of year, um a proximity of the accent growing to the tree to kind of
Mm-hmm.
dictate the environment, paint the picture. I love that. I thought of showing the viewer just enough so that their mind's eye will show them the rest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but when it comes to Shohin, there's so many more moving parts,
Yeah,
and it is a big thing.
it's hard
Uh,
to get it all together.
so yeah, you got your tool bag to bring to the
Yep.
show. We forgot to mention one thing, which is pretty important: the cleanup of the tree and the application of the moss to make
Yes.
it look seamless.
Do that before you get to the show. I remember the last national I was at. This was, I don't know, 2016, no, 2018, maybe. I don't know. I remember Bill getting on the microphone and being like, if your pot isn't weeded and oiled, it's not getting on display until it's ready. Like you
Yeah.
have to have it clean and like have it when you take it to the show, it has to be ready. No cleanup
Mm-hmm.
there, maybe some last minute tidying up, but like, yeah, clean up your tray.
Oil
Mm,
is something that I didn't think would come up. Not because I was sitting there saying, "Oh, Carmen better not mention oil." I swear,
oil.
no. I was just like almost forgot about it. I was like,
Right.
"Wait, that's a really great thing to bring up." So,
Mm-hmm.
unglazed containers may look all cool and rugged in your backyard with the mildew or the little bit of what might be patina on them,
Mm-hmm.
but it might bum some practitioners out to know that you got to get the pot cleaned up to the your
Mm-hmm.
best of your ability, and you might knock off some of that crud kind of patina that you think is really looking at making it have that look.
Mm-hmm.
Because in most formal shows, true patina, and this is a whole bonsai pot evaluation,
Yep.
a bonsai pot with true patina has absorbed the organics and the stain into the clay body itself.
Yep.
And so you got to clean that pot up, and then you have to rub it down with some people use camellia oil, it's the same stuff that
Mm-hmm.
they use to clean their tools. It's an
Mm-hmm.
imported Japanese oil. And then you can also use vegetable oil.
Mm-hmm. I've
Pretty
seen baby
pretty
oil.
straightforward.
We use a beeswax floor polish, but it
That's
smells really
smart.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. It's less slippery.
Yeah. You're gonna oil the pot up, but don't oil it up to like where you're literally
Yeah,
it's
you just want it so that it looks, if you're comparing it to like paint finishes, like eggshell. Like you don't even want to go semi-gloss. You're like one past matte. You want to be maybe eggshell. But it's amazing what just that little application of oil, how polished it makes your pot look. Like you don't want
Mhm.
anything shiny that's going to slip out of your hand, but it just makes it like a lot of times it makes the color a lot richer. Um, and
Mhm.
it just adds this level of, I don't know, cleanliness and formality to it that it really makes a huge difference.
It
So
makes
bring
the
that with you too, because you might need a touch up, or somebody else might need to borrow it because they forgot.
the that's a great way to put it, is the polish and the representation. It brings a lot of respect to the container,
Mm-hmm.
because the container is the frame, and it's really holding up the show with the tree.
Right. Yeah.
So if your container's just gross and got crap growing on it, and it's,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if your container is old enough to have things that make it imperfect, let's say you got a crack in it and it's been properly gold filled. I can't remember the name for that technique.
Oh, I know it. I know it. Kintsugi.
Kintsugi. There we go.
Kintsugi. I think it's K. Kintsugi.
Kintsugi.
Something like that.
We got a lot of bonsai words of the week just kind of popping off here.
Kintsugi. Yeah.
Kintsugi. So yeah, that's when a bonsai container or other bonsai ornament made out of ceramic has been broken and then it's joined back together. But instead of trying to hide the flaw, it's a Japanese technique that was developed to embellish the flaw,
Mm-hmm.
to bring reverence to the story of the container, which is, I mean, leave it up to the Japanese for the beautiful poetry that is
Mm-hmm.
everything bonsai. But this is another one of those poetic approaches where we're not trying to hide stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We want all the flaws to be out in the open, and if a container cracks, it's not like a tree where we can just, if we break a branch, we cut it off and we thread graft anew, or we just regrow it from the tree if we're
Mm-hmm.
lucky. Uh, Bonsai containers just don't grow or split into like two bonsai containers like a worm. Like
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's if it's an
It'd be nice if
incomplete
they did
piece.
though.
Wouldn't that be weird?
When something falls off a bench and it's just whoop, now you have two containers.
Or if they had like the replicating charm on
Mm.
them, like in Harry
Hmm.
Potter,
Oh
where
yeah.
they just kind of start popping into multiple pieces, and you can't stop it, and then
Mm.
eventually you're overwhelmed and buried in a pile of bonsai pots.
I
That's a
hope that it's a
dream.
pot you like at least.
Just to suffocate under a pile of really fancy Sarah Rainer pots. You're like,
Oh my
oh,
gosh.
awesome. But no, no, the the whole thing of bringing them back together. I mean, that could be. I've seen glazed ones done
Mhm.
too. So, but yeah, it's kintsugi. Is
I think
that,
so. Kintsugi.
yeah?
I think.
Uh, that's a good way to look at it. Now, don't go intentionally breaking your pots. Like
Mm-mm.
kintsugi is reserved for pots, like I said, with reverence. With, they could be antiques, they could be
Mm-hmm.
important containers that were used for important trees. And I'm not saying that your tree is not important because it wasn't on a postage stamp. Um, you know, like I'm I'm making a reference to Amy laying how her trees were on postage stamps.
Mm-hmm.
That's noteworthy, like pinnacle of bonsai right there. That's awesome.
Yep.
And if those one of her containers would break, yes, that would get that treatment. But the same thing could be true. Like I have trees in my collection that are going on training for several decades. On like the third decade of their training, if they have a pot that I had custom made or I've had a pot for a long time, I would like to preserve it because stuff happens. It's PG, very PG oriented here. I'm not even, but y'all know what I'm saying. Stuff happens. Frosts, uh, people,
Wind,
wind, and other people
people,
who don't know, you know,
animals,
yeah, animals,
children.
yeah, things. Children are kind of people. But
Yes,
yeah,
that's true.
but but the pot is definitely important. The pottery.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, mossing the tree. That so we're kind of from the ground up. We've cleaned and polished the pot. Imperfections are either taken care of or embellished in some special
Right.
way, depending on the container. Mossing. I feel like this is a little bit more of a controversial thing. Could be
Hmm.
approached in a lot of different ways. From what you have at the Curtigas
Crataegus.
um, gardens, from
Yes.
your experience, those trees are mossed up almost all year long because of the way you guys moss them there.
Uh, yeah. A lot of times when we do repots, we use a shredded sphagnum moss as a top dressing, and a lot of times we'll kind of inoculate that with some of the nice green moss that we have in the garden, so that the moss that grows on the tree is something that we like. We've got a couple mosses that grow wild that are like walking mosses, climbing mosses that just kind of look ratty. So we try to
Mm,
keep those out of the pots. So, but also even if we don't inoculate them, there is just so much moisture and so much moss here that it will grow whether we want it to or not. So a lot of times our trees already have moss on them just because that's how they grow here. Um, yeah, but if you don't have moss, then that's something you can. It's great if you have your 2-year plan and you repot. You can start growing moss on your pot, and then by 2 years, you'll have a lovely covering of it. Otherwise, you'll have to harvest good moss and put it on your pot if you're going for the moss to look.
yeah, and same thing's kind of over here in Louisiana. We are very humid. The moss does grow here pretty regularly, and I could see what you
Mhm.
mean by the creeping moss.
Yeah.
That stuff looks a little weird. It's got like a slimy texture to it sometimes that's
Mhm.
just not very
It's
appealing.
it's nice for like the mounded plants and kind of the ones that we have that are on slabs and not actually in pots. They can be helpful to kind of hold everything together. But yeah, usually we want not that one.
Believable stuff. Yeah, we have mosses here that look like little, I think they're called spearhead moss.
Mm-hmm.
It's got, and I'll probably put some on my water so you can see it, Carmen, next
Mm-hmm.
week. But it's this little moss that has like a little tiny piece that sticks up, and it looks like a little flower.
Oh,
Little,
cool.
it's very tiny, and we have a lot of
Yeah,
it here, and it turns reddish sometimes, so it even gives it a
cool.
little extra color pop to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the fern moss that grows
Mm-hmm.
here. I think you guys have a lot more fern mosses than we do, but it's the moss that literally stands up and it looks like a little tiny fern. It's like a centimeter tall in some
Mm-hmm.
cases. And sometimes they drape and stuff. They're very lovely mosses.
Really pretty.
And one of the things that I will see, so this is why I said controversial, because I think there's a lot of moss application techniques. So there's the blanketed, just like straight one texture, one
Mm-hmm.
color moss. Sometimes I'll see the thing. I have this also have this other species of moss that grows here. It's a very velvety moss,
Mm.
and it's very off-putting because it looks fake. It looks kind of pincushiony,
Yeah.
acrylic. It looks like it's made out of acrylic.
Yeah.
Um, and that stuff I'll kind of take off of there, or I will mesh in a patchwork of moss into it
Mm-hmm.
to kind of break up that awkwardness of that velvety looking moss.
Yeah.
And why I say it's controversial is because there is no wrong way to do this. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen beautiful bonsai displays get ruined by a moss application. Now, no,
Hmm.
I can't say who, I can't name drop, I can't say anything because it's not fair. Because at
Right.
the end of the day, this is art and it's your art first. Art is for you, and then it's for the critiques afterwards.
Yeah.
Um, so, but a blanket, in my opinion, a blanket flat just arrangement of moss where it has no breakup. It's kind of just like you peeled off an entire sheet and put it straight on there.
Hmm.
Doesn't feel naturalistic to me.
Hmm.
And I tend to go for a patchwork moss. And so I will take as many varieties as possible and give literal mounds of moss in places, but then flat in other places where you give some kind of terrain
Hmm.
to around the tree, because we're supposed to be making a tree that looks small, and the whole point of this moss is to scale. It's supposed to look like grass, prairie land grasses or something.
Hmm.
Or even like some people say, well, and here's a question for you, Carmen. I'm sure you see this a good bit, is do you moss everything in display? Is it appropriate to moss an alpine tree where we know that grasses would not normally grow?
Yeah, we generally don't moss our conifers as much. Sometimes we'll do a little bit of moss, and we're lucky to have a lot of lichens that grow here.
Mhm.
So we use a lot of lichen as well. But yeah, if we have a ponderosa pine, we generally don't, uh, we wouldn't moss the whole thing. Um, and I think too, you don't, if you don't moss your tree, at least make sure there's no weeds and at least make sure there's a nice top dressing. Um, but yeah, for some of those, yeah, alpine species, ponderosa, um, limber pine, that kind of thing, will often, yeah, minimal moss, more lichen, if we do anything. Yeah.
Yep. And mossing, I've heard people say, to kind of contradict the whole thing, is some people say moss a tree in display no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've seen shows in Indonesia. I haven't been there personally. I mean, show pictures of them online
Right.
where they'll do a black lava top
Mm-hmm.
dressing.
I've seen that too. Yeah, I think a lot of it is cultural because I think in Japan, a lot of the shows, the show books that I've seen from Kokufu and stuff, I think everything is mossed mostly. Yeah, so I think it's a lot of it's cultural, regional, that kind of thing. Depends on where you are in the world and what you have available.
It does it does help a lot to pay attention to some type of top dressing for show.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
bonsai.
it gives you that. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, bonsai soil looks great depending on the quality of your soil, the appearance of your soil. Bonsai soil, to people who do bonsai and really take it to that extent of, I use pumice, akadama, and lava in my mix, and look how beautiful that mix is.
Mm,
Look,
yeah.
play that beautiful bean footage. Kind of like that tells you how old I am. So the bonsai soil looks great. If it's scaled correctly to the bonsai that is planted in it, it looks even
Hmm.
better.
Right.
But moss elevates the tree to the next level. It takes it to a surrealistic feel,
Yeah. It
which is
gives you that again, that kind of finished, clean look. And I think traditionally what I've heard, and I can't totally say this is 100% true, but I think what I've heard is that when the Japanese, showing their trees inside in a tokonoma, one of the reasons they put moss on it was because dirt is dirty, and so it was to give this clean look. You take your shoes off
hmm,
when you go inside, you put moss on your tree so there's not dirt exposed. Um, so I think it kind of just to give that real polished, clean look.
yeah, no, that makes sense. That really
Mm-hmm.
does. Um, we're running long on this one. There was a couple of things I wanted to say real quick before we say goodbye for the week. But to close us out, this is the last thing I'm going to say, and then we can follow back up on the next episode about display if we feel like we want to touch back on this. But not only do we clean the pot, not only do we moss the tree, you want to put furniture polish on your stand, of course. You want to get that looking nice, try to resolve any scratches in it. Make sure
Mm-hmm.
your kusamono is treated the same way. Clean your
Yep.
kusamono's pot. Moss dress your kusamono. I know it sounds silly. Moss dress the kusamono too. That goes a long way.
Yeah, it
Um,
does.
and then clean the trunk of your bonsai. Clean the trunk and the branches. If you got a tree that has really old bark on it and scrubbing and cleaning is not really an option, then try to present that in the best way possible within the means or your understanding of how the species should be presented clean.
Mm-hmm.
Clean,
Yeah.
clean, like Carmen's saying, dirt is dirt. Dirt is dirty. Cleanliness in Japan is key. That's, I mean, they literally hold it up to like how we joke about like cleanliness is close to godliness. You just you want to you don't want to show everybody the grime of the backyard. You want to show them this is my best work. This is what I'm putting forward right now, and this is bonsai. This is how I understand bonsai. It's kind of like getting ready for a job interview. Imagine that you're
Mm-hmm.
putting your tree in a job interview. I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of a weird
You
way to
don't
think
show
about it.
up with algae on your deadwood.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And make sure you tuck in your tree's shirt,
Right.
aka the edges. You got roots and stuff
Tuck your
hanging out
moss
the
in.
side. Tuck your moss in.
How
So
embarrassing for that tree. God.
yeah, for all their stuff to be
So
hanging
much
out.
algae just on there. Oh.
Yeah, and we can touch more on display a little bit later, but did want to say really quick before we move on to the bonsai word of the day. Um, Thank you guys for listening. If you guys have listened this far into the show, that's awesome. Really appreciate it. The longer y'all listen, the more numbers we get, the algorithms, all that good stuff, things that are outside of my understanding as well. Don't worry about it, guys. Listening to the show, subscribing to your favorite listening platform. But you can also go over to support us on Facebook. We don't have the Facebook page up just yet, but I think we were supposed to do that. We'll get to it. But
Like 3 weeks ago,
yep,
but
it's fine.
we'll get there. It's close. Just
Go
need
over
photos.
to Underhill Bonsai, follow like me on there. You can I can't accept many friend requests on Facebook. That's just how it is, guys. I'm sorry. Because of the way Facebook is. But we will try to do a group page for little things for bonsai on Facebook as well. You can go over to Becoming Bonsai on Instagram for Carmen to go check
Yep.
out her, shenanigans. But yeah,
There's a lot of creatures on my Instagram right now. There are a lot of
yeah,
animals around here.
a lot more animals than bonsai stuff recently, but it
Yeah, I
is
got to
it is
get
the
back to it.
wild Pacific Northwest. Um, but yeah, and then for Mike, you can go over to kitsunebonsai.com and see Mike's offerings. See if you're in the state of Florida, you're in luck. Mike is your guy. He travels,
Mhm.
teaches, maintains collections. I do as well in Louisiana. I mean, if you live in Louisiana, you're lucky. No, I'm just joking. Um, no, it's just have to make sure that we kind of talk about these things every once in a while and let people know what's going on. If you want to support us on social media, check out what we got going on. We're definitely there. We're present.
Mhm.
And then, like I said, go over to patreon.com/little things for bonsai people. If you haven't become a bonsai bud or a best bud or whatever tier you're comfortable with to help support the show and be part of our Discord, hang out, talk bonsai extra on the free time. I just can't get enough. You can't just listen to a podcast for an hour. You gotta talk
You got
about
to be our best
bonsai
friend.
all day. Yeah. You gotta this is like these other content creators I listen to for Magic the Gathering. Yes, I play a lot of Magic. That's one of my other nerdums or nerd intricacies. But they say we'll love you as much as we can without making you uncomfortable. I always thought that was pretty funny.
That's
But
hilarious. I
yeah,
love that.
but yeah, no, we would appreciate it. So bonsai word of the week for this episode. We're going to try to go through it because we're a little over, but it's not that big of a deal. Decandle or decandling.
Handling.
Yes. And Carmen wanted to actually talk about this one. She brought this one up.
I'll talk
So
about this one. I feel like there's a lot of kind of mystery around what decandling is and a lot of confusion as to what you're doing there. And decandling is something that you do on double flush pines, where you actually physically remove the candle in the springtime. I'm knee deep in decandling black pines right now. We do this to rebalance the tree, get better ramification, all of that. So I won't go through exactly, how to do it, but there's a difference there between, your double flush pines, um, which are the ones you decandle, and your single flush pines like Scots pine, shore pine, ponderosa pine, all these other things, um, where you don't decandle. If you're going to shorten your candle, you pinch it. So that is shortening that candle, removing a piece of that candle, not actually cutting the entire thing off. Um, I think that covers it. Anything to add, Evan? I ran out of
like,
things to say.
it's a
The end.
no, it's a broad topic. I will say another thing about decandling. So decandling is it's very important to note that that is a technique you use on developed trees. If you're growing out branches on a pine tree and you're trying to get girth, you're trying to get movement, you're trying to set a branch for placement, you're trying to build a tree, do not decandle until you build the tree and then reduce back the tree to where you get those needle buds back bud on the tree. It's another thing to note. If you're growing out a tree, and you could listen to a little bit of earlier stuff where I awkwardly stumbled through a conversation with Jonas Dupuy about Japanese black pine development in earlier episodes when it was formerly called Bonsai Southeast. But you want to grow out a long shoot, long branch, and you want to leave needle buds. You never want to remove needles from the bases of your branches. Doesn't matter how it's a weird thing where you're kind of like, don't clean up the tree. Don't try to get space in there. Leave needles back there. And it sounds weird, but you can't grow the branch back if you don't have something to back bud back to. So the candles are those extensions on pine trees. They look really weird. On Japanese black pines, it's actually very easy to find them. They literally look like a candlestick pops up. It's like whitish, silvery kind of color. And then it has like a tip on it where it looks like it has a little flame on it. That's a candle. And they can extend anywhere from a 1/4 inch all the way up to 3 inches. They can get massive. And if you cut them off in decandling season, this was discovered turn of century bonsai technique on accident where a Japanese bonsai master had his whole yard ravaged by caterpillars one season and ate all the candles off. And he was like, oh man, that's it. I'm done for. All my trees are weakened to the point where they're just going to die back and I'm going to lose them. And lo and behold, the Japanese white pine back bud, like you wouldn't believe it. When you decandle a Japanese black pine, you're pushing all that energy positive back, the oxygen's back into that branch, and it will produce multitudes of new candles that you can select and make your divisions. That's what decandling is used for, but don't use it on a developing tree. I know it sounds complex.
Right. And then there's a stage where in development where you're like halfway there, where you're like decandling most of it, but sometimes you leave candles here and there because you're trying to strengthen an area. So it gets really complicated, but essentially decandling is removing a candle fully, where something like pinching is removing a piece of it. But I'm glad you brought Jonas up because he has a really, really, really great blog post on black pine. I don't know the title of it off the top of my head, but it's like a photo. It talks you right through what to do for your spring work on black pine, photo by photo, so you can actually see what he's talking about too. So if you have questions about what the heck you're doing with your black pine, definitely go read that blog. But you're not in decandling yet, are you? You're a little bit later because you're in Louisiana.
Yeah, we do. We do usually in July.
Yeah, that tracks. Yeah, usually if you're in a warmer climate, you have a longer growing season, so you decandle later in the year. Whereas we have a long growing season, but not as long, so we have to go a little bit sooner in the year. So
it's weird because I can get 2 candle flushes because I'll get a false second spring near October. So there are people who are trying to kind of tease out the methods of decandling, getting another growing season, and then decandling again. But we can't do a full decandling because it'll weaken.
I've seen that sometimes in development too. Like you can almost push 3 seasons of growth in a year instead of just 2, like sets of growth. But I think after a certain amount of time, it starts to weaken your tree. But I don't have all that. That's a whole other topic. But it's interesting what you can do with black pine.
if you guys go over to bonsaitonight.com, um, one of the ones I was able to find, this isn't one showing the pinching technique, but he's got his website where you can go over to his blog and you go to how-to guides in his drop down, and he has an entire section dedicated to Japanese black pine development.
Oh,
And if you
sweet. I
can't
haven't
find
been
it,
there for a while.
if you can't find it, he has a search bar too, where you can just type in Japanese black pine and it pops up with all the articles he's ever written. And
Hmm.
Jonas
He
writes a
knows
lot.
black pine.
Yeah, he's got a lot of recorded information on there. You can go and backtrack trees he's developed from nothing to awesome bonsai trees. But anyway, I think we are good on this episode. We covered a lot of ground. We didn't get to the pop bonsai.
Oh, that's okay. I'm all ready for it for next time.
Yep. Maybe whenever we go to do when we go to the show next week, we can do that
Ooh.
then. And then we can kind of give I think we should do some photos of the
Oh
show.
yeah.
And then
We should do some like Instagram live. Woo!
yep, we can do that. We can go in and do some woos and
Woo!
look at some trees. And I think we could do like a little what's that called whenever you just kind of go through and like
Like a critique, like a
bonsai in review,
bonsai in review. Yeah, we'll be all snooty about it.
Yeah, we can
My
go through
glasses
and talk about the varieties that we see and stuff. That will be very useful, I think, for listeners. And then we can tag the photos. They're pretty open to us taking photos there
Oh yeah.
because displaying bonsais, that's why we're doing it, because we want people to see our trees.
Mhm.
So for you guys who are going to be at the learning seminar, if you guys will be there, awesome. We'll see y'all there. Can't wait to meet you. Can't wait to hang out. If not, listen in, and then we check into my Instagram and Facebook on Evan Pardue, or you can go over to Becoming Bonsai for Carmen's. I'm thinking she'll put some stuff on there.
Oh yeah.
And then we'll even post some stuff for the Discord, and we can discuss some trees and stuff. It'll be fun. So yeah, thanks for tuning in with us, guys, and thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you guys on the next one.
Bye.